Good morning, guys. Angelo here on Facebook Live, Director of Lambros Realty. Thank you for tuning in once again. Now, today we're going to talk about how to value your own home. Okay, seems to be a common problem where people aren't too sure what their home's worth. They're often told, let's the market decide. But I'll show you how you can use a formula to ascertain what your property is worth. So I guess at the forefront of this, there's two elements we need to understand, and there's two key pricing methods, I guess, that valuers use to come up with an estimate on what your property is worth. So firstly is the comparison method. Now the comparison method is something that is all of you, I dare say, would be quite accustomed to, and that's the comparable sales. So looking at recent sales in the past 6 months to get an idea of what your property is worth. Look, I wouldn't solely rely on that. The reason I say that is you could have a distressed sale which looks like you look at a comparable sale, distressed sale, it undersells, and you think, oh dear, why'd that sell for so low? I'm in trouble here. And naturally, if you're selling your home, you don't want those comparable sales, right? People are often quick to jump on the bandwagon and go, well, that sold for this, which is a price well above expectations, and then you're falsified into believing that you can get the same thing as well. On the flip side, if a property undersells because of a distressed sale, or not undersells, but doesn't achieve the price you would anticipate, you're not going to jump on the bandwagon there going, well, that's a comparable sale, let's use that and I should get that. So you can't, you need to be mindful of that. All right, so that's where that sort of falls down. But to an element, yes, you will use comparable sales, and I'll explain that in a second. Now, the other one, which is important and which is a big one, is the summation method. Now, the summation method is adding the value of land to the value of improvements on the land. Okay, now you can't really go wrong with this because there's areas where you don't have many comparable sales, you don't have, the markets where rent is not strong. You could have a host of properties where values are not disclosed, right? So you can't use the comparable sales. You're sort of, you're left stranded thinking, all right, well, what do I do now? Whereas the summation method is factual data and evidence on land value and improvements to land, and especially that of yours. So to break the two down, when I'm talking land value, you're looking at size, you're looking at shape, you're looking at location, topography, and you're also looking at infrastructure. As for the improvements element, you're looking at the age, the style, architectural features naturally, the number of rooms, renovations, and just the general overall appearance. All right, so taking that into consideration, you're looking at your property as a sole, a sole product, right? You're not using others as comparables, because the moment you start using comparables and solely comparables, it starts to become wishy-washy. You could have comparable sales where I'm sure you've had agents in the past that have used properties of low values to try condition you down in price, right? Then later do you find when you're looking at other comparables, you start to see that, well, hold on, my property is actually more so on the higher end of those comparables. So I guess you can see where the inconsistencies start to come in line with the comparable sales. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we don't use them, but it's, I guess it's a minor element and a minor portion of what you use overall. So it all comes down to making sure that all numbers align. Okay, so I'm going to go through, it's a 6-step process here, and it'll all tie in at the end, and you'll probably think as I'm going through, what's he going on about, but as I get to the end, it'll make sense. Okay, so step 1, you want to work on the accumulative total. Now, what do I mean by that? You want to look at, okay, the year you purchased your property, okay, and then you want to see the percentage increase on property values. Okay, so say you purchased in 1998, it's grown 120% and you purchased for $540,000. You then multiply the 120%, whatever I said, times the 500,000 or 520, my apologies, whatever number I used there, and then you'd add that to your 520. Okay. Now the problem with that is you'll go, well, wow, that's low. That hasn't hit the market. It's well below what the market should be. But as I said before, with the summation method, we've got to look at improvements and land value as well. And land value will change if there's zoning changes or improvements. So we'll get to that. So that's a base figure to work with. Okay. Step 2, we then need to look at the rental yield of your suburb. Okay, so we've got to ascertain what is the median rental yield for your suburb. Okay. Step 3, we've then got to work out what is your property likely to rent for. Okay, on a weekly, weekly rental, and then we obviously multiply that by 48 weeks in the year, which will give us our annual return. Less the 4, which is downtime anticipating to find someone to lease. Now, step 4, we want to work out the dollar per square meter value on your property, okay, and that's including house and land. Now this will be done with comparable sales, and my advice is to obviously use at least 10 to try and make it as accurate as possible within the past 6 months, within no more than a 500 to 1 kilometer radius, 500 meters preferable. Okay. Now what you want to do is you want to take the median, so you look at the median price there, and you want to average it out. So if the median price is 1.52, okay, and you divide and say it's an 800 square meter block, which is the average there, you'll then divide the 1.52 million divided by 800 per square meter, which will give us roughly $1,900 per square meter. Okay, I hope I'm making sense here, guys. So what you'll do is you'll then look at you work with that number, okay, and then you'll obviously, if you're say 750 squares, you'll multiply the 1900 by 750, which will give you 1.4 something off the top of my head. So what you want to look at, and when you're looking at comparables, is not the sale price. You want to look at the dollar per square meter value and make sure that the dollar per square meter value is in line with everything else and is consistent. Now you'll find that when you do that, a pattern should start to form. So you'll start to notice that $1,820 to $2,010 may very well be the range there. So what you look at is it's like, all right, well, at 1900 per square meter, which seems to be the average, I'm sitting at 1.45 mil as a general rule of thumb. Then you've obviously got to take step 6 would be I think I integrated step 5 with step 4, which is multiplying the values. Step 6 would be looking at the supply and demand element, and obviously days on market. So when you get your range would be somewhere, using this example, of say 1800 to 2000 per square meter, and you're roughly at 19. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at the range, you're going to multiply 1800 by your 750 squares and multiply 2000 by your 750 squares. Okay, that will therefore give you your range. Step 5. Step 6, we then have to we then look at supply and demand, which is basic economies of scale, and days on market. So if we're in an area where days on market are quite low, it means that things are obviously turning over quite well. And depending on condition and whatnot of your house, you'd probably be more on the higher end of the spectrum. If days on market are quite excessive, and when I say excessive, 60 days plus, it'd probably be wise to hold off selling if that's an option. Depending on what's happening on the market, you've got to look at market conditions. That's a different kettle of fish altogether. But if you're in a position where you need to sell, you'll probably find that you're probably more on the lower end of the spectrum. So going back to step 1, where we tallied our cumulative total, you then want to add the improvements you've made to your house when you purchased your existing purchase. So what seems a low price then starts to become, if you've made say 200,000 worth of improvements, you'll start to find that you're up around that 14515 mark, and it starts to make sense. So it starts to tie in, right? Because that accumulative total is solely looking at its unimproved value, right? It's, you've bought the house, and obviously whilst you've lived in it, certainly you've made improvements. If you haven't made improvements and you've just left it as is, that accumulative total may very well be the, you know, the price there. But what you want to do is, when you're multiplying, you know, and multiplying your rental as well. So when you get that 48 times, so say you're getting $900 per week. I probably should have done some written figures here. Sorry, guys. I hope it's not too confusing, but you're more than welcome to call me if this is too confusing. Yeah, so say you're looking at 900 per week times 48, and the suburb's got a rental yield of 3.2%. What you want to look at is, all right, well, at 950 a week times 48, looking at which will give us an annual of say 34,000. Sorry, my maths is bad, but just using a figure here. Now 34,000 over that 1.45 million as an example. Let's just say that's what fair market price is. Times 100 should give you roughly around that 3.2%. Okay, so what you're doing is starting to notice that all the numbers are starting to align. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's how you see, you know, you get your fair market price. Now, don't confuse this with, oh, but I'm not selling for this, or, you know, achieving fair market price doesn't mean you sell for that. You know, buyers buy emotionally and justify with logic. So next talk will be on how to, you know, pricing your home to sell for more. But this is basically telling you how you come up with fair market price and get an idea of what your property's worth. So to summarize, step 1, work out the accumulative total. Okay, so that's obviously the percentage increase from your date of purchase. Then you want to find out, step 2, what is the rental yield, okay, in your suburb. Step 3, what is the likely rental estimate for your property? Step 4, value per square meter, okay, and that's obviously looking at house and land as one. Now you're obviously going to look at least, as I said, 10 comparable sales. You're going to divide the median amount by the block size, which will give you your dollar per square meter. Okay, then what you're going to do, step 5, you're going to multiply this amount from the median value, times it by the per square meter value of, so say, as I said, so 750 squares times the median would be, to give you a ballpark of what your property, so say median's 152, your 752, sorry, say the median's 1.45 mil, block size is 750 squares. You then divide that amount, which will give you, say, $1,900 per square meter, and then you should start to see a pattern with the other 10 that are sort of sitting around there, and you form your range around that amount within sort of a $200 ballpark, high and low. So that would be $1,800 to $2,000. Step 6, you then look at supply and demand and the days on market. Okay, so using basic economies of scale to ascertain if there's heavy demand, that's going to push your price down, which means you're on the lower end of the price spectrum, which would be the $1,800 per square meter. If there's not much for sale, you'll start to notice you're at the higher end of the spectrum. So supply and demand and timing of sale has plenty to do with the final price. So, you know, it's, if there's not much to choose from, people will pay more. If there's plenty to choose from, people will pay less. It's basic thinking. So I hope that makes sense, guys, and I hope I haven't confused you too much. I hope I've sort of got the message across. You're more than welcome to call me on 0286287128 or email me at info@lambrosrealty.com.au if there's something you would like explained furthermore, something that didn't make sense. But I hope this gives you an idea of how to go about valuing your property for sale, and how you'll find that all the numbers will line up to obviously give you the value, right? So you can cross-check everything. So when you're defending and negotiating your price, there's factual data to back it up, not just guesswork. So as I said, in a fortnight's time, on Wednesday the 21st of September, again, Facebook Live broadcast, 8 o'clock in the morning, we're going to be talking about pricing your home to sell for more. So this will be a follow-up to this talk, and using a strategy that'll ascertain, I guess nothing's guaranteed in life, but to give you the best possible chance of achieving more, and how to go about pricing it to hit the market and sell quickly for the right price with no stress. So again, Angelo, Director of Lambros Realty here. I thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you in a fortnight's time. Bye for now.